We're going live. And perfect. Okay. So we are officially going live for round two. Yay, round two. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Yesterday's talk about Astro stuff was like super fun and very lovely. And so many of you reached out with thanks and gratitude for that. So let's go ahead and let's do it again, y'all. Let's make sure that everybody gets a chance to log in. I've got 8 more charts that everybody sent in to me. Again, you inundated me with messages. I'm very appreciative for it. Some of you were kind enough to book consults with me privately because the queue was getting so long, this queue. But if you would like to submit your birth information, I need your birthday, your time, your exact time specifically. So if you don't have birth time, good morning, Dan. Good morning, Nancy. Good morning, Monica. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining on. I appreciate it. So yeah, send me your birth date, your exact birth time, and then your place of birth. Some of you who are in the UK who use month first and day second, make sure that you are spelling out July 3rd or the 3rd of July, as opposed to the numbers of like 7-6. I don't know if that's July 6th or June 7th. Just making sure that everybody's there. Good to see you, everybody. Thank you so much. So again, we're going live with charts. If you have additional questions, I'm looking at the comments, so feel free to type comments as I'm chatting. Again, this is kind of what I've termed Astro-Babble, so I'll be looking at 8 specific charts that everybody's turned in. It might be yours if you messaged me yesterday, and I'll be going in chronological order. So the fastest ones got to the top of the queue. I'll be talking about general astro themes, specific astro themes. We'll see. Yesterday it was all about first house, 7th house oppositions in terms of self versus others and relationship dynamics. We'll see what themes kind of come up today that will be kind of universally applicable to everybody who's watching. So let's go ahead and let's pop a fizzy water and get my pineapple, lovely. Get all that squared away, and we will start pulling up the charts. Again, I can't screen share. Facebook won't let me screen share and talk to you at the same time. It's either the screen or my face. And I think my facial expressions are a little bit more entertaining than the screen. So if you see me looking around, I'm actually looking at the chart on my SolarFire Astro software. And so the first chart that we have was submitted by Michelle, who was born at 7:30 p.m. in, I'm gonna butcher this, I'm so sorry, Colchester. Let's go with that. Let's see what's going on with Miss Michelle. Ooh, Jupiter in Cancer conjoining the Sun in the 8th. That's interesting. So there's going to be a lot of prosperity, specifically revolving around. Oh, that is fascinating. So the Moon is in Libra in the 11th, which is ruling the estates and taxes, that I think is super fascinating, with Pluto there in Libra too in the 11th. So there's this interesting dynamic that Michelle has going on in her chart, where she's got the Sun, the egoic planet, and Jupiter, the planet of prosperity, who likes to just make things really big, in the 8th house of death and taxes and estates. So there's going to be this theme of death, taxes, and estates, everything that the 8th house rules throughout the life, because the Sun's placement is there. But then also, that Sun Jupiter is ruled by her Moon in the 11th house of friends. So the idea that she might have friends at an early age who unexpectedly pass away, but it actually works in her favor. Social groups that she belongs to involving a lot of death. As an example, she might belong to a hospice support group. She might belong to or find great comfort in surrounding herself with estate planning attorneys, accountants, and people who are kind of in that liminal space of dealing with people who are transitioning physically or spiritually from one realm to another. She's got a Sagittarius ascendant, which doubles down on that Jupiter in the eighth house. So there's again super, I mean, mediumship qualities is what kind of comes to the surface there, just because death is part of the equation. Learning how to balance that ability to again walk with the liminal is a really big part of it, especially with Neptune and Sagittarius at 16 in the first house of self as well. Neptune in the first house is a little bit of a difficult placement because when we see Neptune, Neptune is all about, again, that confusion, that muddiness, that sleepiness, potential addiction issues. We can think of Neptune as like the astrological embodiment of the fairy realm. So it's that place that you go where everything is super like in technicolor, but also really confusing, and you don't know where you are, and you don't know what time it is, and you don't know why these people are dressed so awesome and why they're giving you this food, and then you just can't return to the human world. Like it's that type of metaphysical trap that Neptune kind of represents. What else do we have in Michelle's chart? She's got her Venus in Virgo in the 10th, which is technically the sign of its detriment. So not really great, but it is ruling her sixth house of work. Mars is also co-present in Virgo, as well as the North Node in the 10th. So there is workaholic tendencies. There's because whenever I see Mars and Venus in the same sign, I often relate that to working specifically on all ends of the gender spectrum, working with men and women specifically in the workplace, or working with gender identities in the workplace as well. Fighting for work equality, something that Michelle would be very passionate about. But that Taurus on the 6th being ruled by Venus in the 10th really bodes well for just long-term career success. I think that's absolutely fabulous. She's also got Saturn and Leo in the 9th, which is ruling her second house of finances in Capricorn. Mercury's there up in Leo too. So there's a propensity to travel and earn money with travel, although Saturn doesn't really like to travel too much. But the places nearby that she would travel to would actually be able to give her a certain amount of financial gain with that, especially Mercury being tied to the sun in the 8th. There's an idea that her work would actually be very prosperous should she travel and work with that death aspect kind of on the road. Just and likewise the Venus in Virgo, although it's technically in detriment, I think that Venus in Virgo is a lovely placement for an executive female position, and somebody like it's that Venus aspect who has her hair pulled up in a tight bun, glasses, really tight skirt, really strong shoulder pads, and is able to walk through the office with a sense of authority and command and detail-oriented focus that really allows her to get the job done. And that's what I see with Venus and Virgo. It's not that Venus and Pisces, which is just overflowing with all that love and abundance, but those wishy-washy Pisces tendencies. It's a little bit more of a focused Venus, a little bit more of a determined Venus, especially because it's connected to the career and the work houses in Michelle's chart. But because that Pluto in Libra in the 11th is being ruled by Venus in the 10th, there's a great potential to make friends at work, but also frenemies at work. The idea that the people around you might be a little bit more toxic than you like, but over time, as you age, you'll start to realize the life lesson of those toxic people can be worked to your advantage and actually help you, making sure that you understand that burning bridges is of detriment to your chart. It's not something that you should do, not something that you would do really, because everybody has a value, right? And that Pluto in Libra in the 11th being ruled by Venus and Virgo in the 10th is talking about how in your career there will be toxic people that you have to engage with. However, those toxic people are specifically valuable in social group settings to unlock opportunities that you wouldn't have the ability to work with otherwise. So that's Michelle's chart. Thank you so much. And everybody is starting to message me now with their birth times at this time. So the second coming of the flood has occurred. Hi, Laura. Glad you're able to tune in today. Hey, Nathan. Hey, Christine. Hey, Dan Fee. Hey, Tony. Hey, Tara. Everybody's jumping on saying good morning. Thank you. So great to be here again. Shalom. there's lots of good stuff. So we're on chart number 2 now. We'll look at chart number 2. And again, I run these reports, but I don't look at them. These are the first times that I'm looking at them. Here we have Pat's chart, who was born August 9th, August 9th at 6:51 a.m. Stockholm. Stockton. What a strong name. We have a sun in Leo in the first house. However, Uranus in Leo is also conjunct the ascendant. That's a spicy personality right there. Pat, that's an absolutely hilarious combination, and I have several clients with this placement, and I just absolutely love how like being accused of being crazy, but crazy fun in a good way. It's very Tasmanian Devil. It's like it's very Leo. It's very flamboyant. It's very charismatic. It's very entertaining. But that Uranus on the ascendant really makes this kind of unpredictable chaos element very present in your personality and in your chart. But it's a very strong personality, and that can be of great value to you over the long run, should you learn how to harness it correctly. I sense a theme. I sense a theme because we have a second round of Venus in Virgo. Venus in Virgo has showed herself at 0 degrees, actually right on the cusp of Pat's second house of finances. So that's fun. Also, a second, was the last chart Leo ascendant? I've forgotten already. I blocked it out. Michelle was Sag ascendant. So Pat's the fire. They're both fire ascendants, but Pat has a Leo ascendant. Which is putting Taurus in the 10th house. So Pat's Venus in the second in Virgo is ruling her 10th house of career. Again, when we see a planet who is ruling both the 10th house of career and the second house of finance, that's a really good sign. However, we also have for Pat Pluto in the second house and the North Node in the second house. So there's a lot of learning in regards to finance that Pat's doing in this lifetime, especially because the Moon in Pisces, the South Node, and the Lot of Fortune are all in the 8th house, opposing those placements in the second. So we've got this idea that one of Pat's major skills that they're going to need to really double down on is financial wellness and making sure that everything is correct from a bookkeeping standpoint. They've got Saturn in Capricorn in the 6th, which is great for work ethic. It is retrograde, so that's a stubborn work ethic. That's a digging heels in work ethic. Not really something that you would make friends with, but something you would make a great boss with over time, just because you're able to use those Saturnine principles of restriction in a constructive way. Even if you do stick to your guns and make people rather uncomfortable while you do it, you know that it's for their own good. The MC is at 16, which is just separating from a trine to that North Node. So again, back to career finance with Pat. There's a lot of lessons there. One of the things that I like to talk about with a Moon in Pisces that's opposing planets in the second house of finance is the heart wants to be spiritual. The heart wants to be this kind of hippie, gone with the wind, or rather gone with the waves, because we're talking about Pisces, kind of floating just wherever life takes you, really in that, again, slight spiritual space, mediumship space, psychic intuitive space, just kind of working with all things crystalline and energy healing and angelic forces and all the blah, 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 versus her actual life goal with that North Node is to master the physical resources of the second house in finance. So making sure that the heart doesn't get swept away, that it detracts from the life mission, which is really understanding what physical value is, how to use it, and making sure that that's correct. And really, that's where we go back to the Sun in Leo and Uranus conjoining the ascendant. That powerful personality really allows you to be a good and benefic dictator, a fun boss, really. However, we need to understand that the bottom line comes before fun, and the bottom line comes before the spiritual intuitive spot in terms of your life mission. So although it's important to respect how fun it is to just be you and be yourself and encourage others to do the same, and also make sure that you respect the intuitive side of the equation and listen to the messages that you're receiving. At the end of the day, your focus should be the spreadsheets, the QuickBooks, the nitty gritty resources of those earth elements specifically. Then we've got, let's see, Mercury in the 12th ruling Mars in the 11th. That's a tricky placement, a very tricky placement, especially because Mercury is in Cancer being ruled by the moon in the 8th. So communication is a little bit difficult. Again, friends dying from an early age, a potential theme, because Mercury is ruling Mars in the 11th. The 12th house is the house of hospitalizations and hidden enemies, which is then ruled by the moon in Pisces in the 8th. There's a lot of going back and forth between a secondary theme of these two charts that we've pulled up is friends potentially dying, and that opening the gateway for spiritual gifts to emerge. So those are some interesting things about Pat's chart. Yeah, there are other things that I see in charts, and a lot of people ask me to not pull punches. Unfortunately, in a public forum like this, it's difficult to not pull punches because there are certain chart placements that I know and that I've talked with several clients about that are tear-jerking statements. And so I'm not necessarily comfortable doing those on Facebook Live. But there are things that I would like to talk about with some of these charts that I think some of you are picking up on that we'll just have to get to at a later time. But that's a little bit about Pat. Thank you, Pat, for checking in and giving me your birth information. Please message the birth times to me specifically via Messenger. Do not post birth information publicly. Delete those comments, please. That is for your own safety. Tara. I need birth date, place, and exact birth time. If you do not have an exact birth time, unfortunately, I can't work with that. That's one of the downfalls of astrology. It is time specific. So we need to be very aware of that. Again, if you are in the UK, or just if you're submitting your birth time in general, make sure that you're not doing like 5/5/1970. Make sure that you're saying March or May 5th. Make sure that you're spelling it out for me and make sure that all of that is going super well. I can see people sending in messages. I can't read them. I can only read the comments. Unfortunately, Stacy, we cannot show the chart that I'm talking about because Facebook won't let me show the chart and show me at the same time. So that's unfortunate. But hopefully they'll get around that because I think that would be super cool. Yeah, so that being said, let's go ahead and pull up chart number 3. So we're looking at Trish, and Trish was born. She was born at 12 p.m. in Stockton. No, 12 p.m. in Stockton. Did I do that chart already? Now I'm confused. Oh, I think I made an error, everybody. I think I made an error. Let me double check. I will double check. I'll move on to the next chart and I'll double check with that. Sorry, Trish, I'll have to get back to you on that. Let's move on to Colleen's chart, which I know I have the correct time and place for. That's one of the issues with astrology as well, is it's time sensitive, place sensitive, and if I mess one of those things up, especially because this is a live broadcast, can't go back and fix it now. But let's go ahead and look at Colleen's chart. So Colleen was born at 4:48 p.m. in Berlin. That's a lovely place to be born, although which Berlin? There's more than one Berlin in the world, everybody, in case you didn't know that. Thank you, everybody, for continuing to blow up my messenger. I appreciate all of the stuff. Please do not post your birth time in the comments. That is a violation of your privacy. Only private message me. So Colleen was born Berlin 4:48 p.m., which puts Scorpio on the ascendant. Scorpio ascendants for the win. Absolutely lovely. Uranus is also on the ascendant as well, with the North Node conjoining. So a very powerful Scorpio ascendant, very powerful personality there with Colleen. I would consider that a double Scorpio energy, double dose of Scorpio, really embodying those traits of being reclusive, being very intuitive, very watery, very detective oriented, highly sensitive, but also loving and thriving in the dark, shadowy parts of life. That is all Scorpio stuff. Scorpio stuff also being ruled by Mars and Leo in the 10th. Although that's technically a sign-based square formation, the idea that the ruler is present in the 10th means that Colleen is a natural entrepreneur and business person, especially because Mars and Leo is close to a conjunction with the MC, the highest point in her chart. Lots of good stuff there. Absolutely fabulous, Colleen. I highly suggest you go into business for yourself, or at least have a side gig if you do not have that going already. Interesting when we look at finances for Colleen, because Jupiter in Taurus is ruling her second house of finance, but Jupiter in Taurus is in the 7th house of relationships. So partners tend to hold the purse strings for Colleen, especially because the South Node is present. That's a little bit of a malefic formation. Neptune also being present in the second house, there's going to be some financial issues with partners specifically. So just watching out for that. Not necessarily an ideal placement. We just need to be careful with maybe putting your finances in the hands of a trusted accountant or CPA instead of letting your spouse or trusted partner do the books for you, because they may be a little bit too close for comfort, or they might not have the proper qualifications or be able to get you the right tax exemptions that you need. Speaking of taxes, we have Mercury in Gemini in the 8th, glorious, as well as Venus in Gemini in the 8th, and the Sun in Gemini in the 8th. Ooh, Venus in Gemini is at 25 degrees in the heart of the Sun. That is a Kazemi. Bonus points for Colleen. Absolutely fabulous. As somebody who also has Scorpio ascendant and Mercury in Gemini, it doubles down on that entrepreneurial spirit. The 8th house is the house of death. Mercury in Gemini there does give us mediumship tendencies, communication with psychic forces, but specifically very, very well with dealing with other people's money and taking clients and being a business person. Mercury in Gemini in the 8th is something that I see and have personally experienced time and time again. Venus Kazemi in Gemini with the Sun, that's beautiful to have in the 8th. It definitely means that, again, the idea of working with an accountant would be very profitable for you, but also making sure that you understand that taxes and estates will be surrounding you your entire life. So although it's not necessarily a comfortable financial place for you to be in, it is something that will be necessary for you to master in this life experience. And I think that if you were to keep those friends close, especially because Mercury in Gemini is ruling your 11th house of friendships, and double down on your positive relationships with people like accountants, business law attorneys, CPAs. That's going to be a very important stepping stone for your overall success in life. That Venus Sun Kazemi in Gemini is making a sextile to the MC in the 10th, another great sign for business. Jupiter in Taurus in the 7th is ruling the 5th house of creativity and sexuality. That's a great partnership role, especially very fertile for children, with the 5th house being in Pisces, being ruled by Jupiter in Taurus in the 7th. That's a great fertility marker, but it's also a great creative placement. It means that the spouses that you choose are able to take you on these really wild creative spins, and that they tend to be your muse and bring you a lot of creative juice to deal with. So many markers for entrepreneurship, absolutely ridiculous. The 6th house being ruled by Aries, that 6th house of work being ruled by Aries, which then puts the ruler Mars in the 10th in Leo. Again, just the idea of owning your own business, calling your own shots, doing your work independently, and making sure that you're just the boss. Absolutely something that you should consider if you have not already. The moon in Aquarius in the 4th is an interesting opposition to the MC. Although there are so many markers for that entrepreneurial spirit, I think that part of the Scorpio ascendant with the North Node and the moon in Aquarius, so many fixed signs creating conflict here. Just the idea that you have the ability to be very public, but you also have this need to be very reclusive, and making sure to honor both sides of the coin as you move forward, I think will be very important and will continue to be something in your life that you focus on, Colleen, because Aquarius tends to go high and Scorpio tends to go low, but they both have this reclusive tendency where they would prefer to be on their own, away from people, ooh, gross people, please don't touch me people, and honoring that, as well as stepping out in front of the limelight and being like, I love my spouse and I love my job, but then also stepping back and retreating into the cave, or retreating into the nest, as Aquarius does, and just making sure that you can't be touched by the people that you've been surrounded by all day. So interesting stuff. Thank you, everybody who continues to send messages. I will put everybody in queue who continues to be curious. Hello. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Again, please delete your comments with your birth information. That is a violation of privacy. Only send those to me via private message and I will put you in queue. And now let's go to Sabrina. I actually know Sabrina. She's absolutely fabulous person, and we've talked on multiple occasions. She was born 9:15 a.m. in San Jose. Let's talk about Miss Sabrina. Virgo ascendant. That's why I like you, girl. Virgo is one of my favorite signs. And she's got, ooh, here's the theme. Here's the theme, everybody. Venus and Virgo. Venus and Virgo in the first house. Ooh, gosh, Venus and Virgo. Goodness, such a great placement, although technically in her detriment. Classical traditional astrology would view this as a not good placement because Venus likes to be unencumbered. She likes to be voluptuous. She likes to eat what she wants and do what she wants and love who she wants. And Virgo comes in and says, well, no, there are dietary restrictions and there are people who are for your highest good and people who are not for your highest good. And you need to understand boundaries and you need to understand allocation of resources. And here I've put up a spreadsheet for you. And Venus doesn't necessarily operate like that, although I think it's a very wonderful placement to have on the ascendant. It definitely gives an eye for those things that are detail oriented. And we can see that especially because the ruler of her ascendant, Mercury, is in Cancer in the 11th, co-present with the moon in Cancer. The moon is in her favorite sign, her only sign, the sign that she rules, in Cancer. So there's going to be that emotional component, that motherly component. But Mercury and the moon are both in the 11th house of friendship. So the idea that friends are the lifeblood of Sabrina's chart. And a lot of everything that she does revolves around making sure that she is the mom friend and taking care of other people who she holds near and dear to her heart. Mercury is stationing, so it's not retrograde, but it is slowing down. So she does have that hard edge to her communication style, especially with Venus being in Virgo in the first. But Mercury is also ruling her MC in the 10th, so there is great potential for friends going into business with her, friends making good career moves for her, and one of the natural intuitive things that she does is her personality, which is the first house being ruled by Mercury, and the 11th house of friends sets her up for career advancement. So the idea that she takes care of her people, and then her people eventually blossom into these lovely creative beings who then help her in return for everything that she's given them. Great synergy there. She's also got she's got Jupiter in Pisces. Although it is retrograde, Jupiter in Pisces is in the sign of its rulership. It is making a strong trine to both the moon and Mercury in Cancer. So Jupiter is in Pisces in the 7th house of relationships. It's one of those signs that just loves love. It's a great sign for it is a little bit complicated in relationships because it does indicate things like polyamory, not being able to pour yourself into one person but multiple people, which I think is part of that moon in Cancer and Mercury in Cancer in the 11th. The idea that friends are relationships and making sure that, you don't have one person who ties you down and say, hey, all those people that you hang out with, I want you to stop hanging out with them and hang out with me. That's not what Jupiter in Pisces does. Jupiter in Pisces is a hard, everybody must be loved in the 11th the 11th and 7th house, that trine. So that's really awesome. Let's look at some problem areas. So we've got Saturn in Sagittarius retrograde. We've got Uranus in Sagittarius retrograde down in the 4th house of family. That's a rough family situation, not necessarily ideal. Also, the home environment tends to be a little bit too restrictive and chaotic. She would rather be out and about on the town. She would rather be hanging out with friends at their place. Going home just feels isolating, but also slightly chaotic and turbulent, because when she's in her own domain, it brings up all of those family traumas. So when we look at Saturn and Sag and Uranus and Sag in the 4th, I think the real power is in staying out in front of the curve in terms of social dynamics, really making sure that, like, if you wanted to professionally couch surf, that would be great. Or just like stay at other people's Airbnbs and take care of them, like that would be fabulous. But the idea that if you're isolated too much at home, especially like we are now, you're bound to encounter that unpredictable lightning in a bottle energy that is Uranus, but also that really depressed, restrictive, dense gravitational energy that is Saturn. So that's that. Yeah, I think that those are really the big things. Pluto and Scorpio in the 3rd eventually will become a great teacher. Eventually will become an amazing artist. But that will grow, that will blossom around year 50. Not necessarily a quick skill to access at this time. Yeah, I think that's all about Sabrina's chart. So thank you so much, Sabrina, for submitting your chart. Let's just real quick look at the comments. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yes, actually, Jojo, I think your chart's coming up in a few. Thank you so much for all the gratitude. Love you, love you. Let's go to our next chart. Oh, Jojo, you're next. So funny. Okay, so Jojo's born at 9:30 p.m. in Liverpool. Liverpool. I should say that with a little bit more of a nasally accent. Let's look at what Jojo's chart talks about. Ascendant in Capricorn, ruling Saturn and Pisces in the 3rd. That's tricky. Oh, she's a new moon baby in Cancer, just like me. So she's got the moon at 22 degrees, the sun at 17 degrees in Cancer. So she was born right after the new moon in Cancer. That conjunction, that new moon energy, is in her 7th house of relationships. The sun is directly opposing the ascendant, though. So we've got some of the themes that we were talking about yesterday with relationship conflict and understanding identity versus relationship. One of the things that a Capricorn ascendant being ruled by Saturn in the 3rd talks about is the identity of the teacher, the identity of somebody who is more than willing to share the spiritual truths that they've been exposed to throughout their life, and that they actually have a lot of very strong opinions about to give to their neighbors, to communicate to those around them, to teach and share with others. Would make a great primary school teacher. However, because the sun and the moon are opposing the ascendant, there's a really rough opposition between the relationships that this person falls into and their sense of self-identity. So making sure that they don't get lost in their identity, making sure that the people that they choose to spend their life with don't dominate their life experience, and understanding that their life's purpose is separate from who they choose to settle down with. It's not necessarily about giving up your life in exchange for theirs, or giving up your life in exchange for the life that you would build together, but understanding who you are as a person is definitely of value and you have so much to give. However, there is a tendency in your chart to be emotionally and egoically suffocated by the relationships that you choose. So we just need to be very, very aware of that. Venus and Mars co-present in Gemini in the 6th. That's an interesting placement. I talk about Mercury. Venus is also retrograde in Gemini, moving backwards towards Mars. That's an interesting dynamic. So in the workforce, there actually is the reverse that's happening. We talked about Venus and Mars being co-present in a sign in the 10th, being great for male-female gender relations in the office and making sure that there's an equality that happens there. Venus is retrograde in Gemini in the 6th house, so the idea that she might find a little bit of fascism in the workplace, a little bit of unneeded male dominance, or the idea of unneeded female weakness, or that she steps up to the plate and she recognizes that women aren't stepping up to her power into their power in their place of work. But Venus in Gemini retrograde is ruling the 10th house of career, so it's an all right career placement. There is a good potential for a lot of great stuff to happen from the work that she does day to day, but we just need to be aware that Venus is retrograde in her chart, and that feminine energy is slightly compromised, and she might need to tomboy it up or feel like she needs to tomboy it up from time to time. That is not the case. There's a very big difference between sacrificing your feminine characteristics and your femininity and being strong and stable and secure. Strong and stable and secure has no gender. So if we really work with your Saturn placement, which is ruling your ascendant, and you're able to channel that inner Capricorn, who is a feminine sign by nature, it's that hard wall of tough love that Capricorn comes forward and says, look, I know that you think just because you have a ball sack that you're entitled to more power than I am, but that is not the case, and let me put you in your place. Exactly like that. So we just need to be a little bit strong and a little bit fierce in regards to those more grounded feminine workplace dynamics. Mercury and Leo in the 8th. That's a savior complex right there. So we have the sun in Cancer for Pat, who is ruling Mercury in Leo in the 8th. And that's somebody who likes to swoop to the rescue amidst chaos, who does very well in multitasking, especially when death is present, when taxes are present, when deadlines are present. But at the same time, not necessarily an ideal placement for Mercury and Leo, who might take advantage of those detrimental situations, which might be frowned upon from a just outstander, from somebody looking in to that situation. We have Neptune and Scorpio retrograde in the 11th. Friends tend to struggle with addiction issues. That's something that I see time and time again, especially opposing Jupiter and Taurus in the 5th. From a medical perspective, there's metabolism issues, there's hypothyroid issues. Whenever I see Jupiter and Taurus rules the thyroid. Jupiter makes things large. Just the idea of metabolism being slow and large, especially with a Capricorn ascendant. Saturn being in Pisces, fluid retention. There's a lot of medical things in this chart that talk about dietary protocols needing to be toned up and exercise needing to be part of the equation. Getting those lungs pumping, especially because Venus is retrograde in Gemini, the sign of the lungs. We need to stimulate the cardiovascular system and really make sure that the body doesn't stagnate too heavily. Okay, so that was fun. We've got a couple more. Thank you, everybody, for submitting your birth time via Messenger. I appreciate that. That keeps your safety in check. Would love a full chart consult. I am available for full chart consults. Thank you so much. You can private message me for those details. Hey, Alex, absolutely love to see you. Let's move on to, we've got 2 more and 20 minutes to do it. So I'll spend about 10 minutes on each chart, give or take. This is Fran's chart. Fran was born 4:02 a.m. in Dublin. And here we go. Scorpio in Virgo can join the ascendant. That's tough life lessons right there. As somebody who has Scorpio, Pluto and Scorpio on the ascendant. Pluto on the ascendant is an interesting formation for you, Fran, because there are pieces of you that nobody will understand. There is a depth to your experience that very few people will be able to touch. They'll try, but they won't be able to understand the depth of that experience. You definitely have a brush of the underworld in your personality. The idea that you seek comfort in places that are hidden, and that have that transformational kind of womb and tomb energy that that Pluto tends to bring forward. That's a core aspect of your personality, especially because, oh my God, friend, I love your chart. Um, Especially because you've got Mercury in Scorpio in the third. So a technical mutual reception because Pluto secondarily rules Scorpio and Mercury rules Virgo, the ascendant. So you've got a double dose of Scorpio. You've put the Sun in Scorpio, Jupiter in Scorpio, and retrograde Venus in Scorpio, technically in her detriment, or fall, rather, technically in her fall, because Venus is naturally opposing her sign, Taurus, which she rules. So you've got a stellium in Scorpio, so you've got that super Scorpio energy, which is probably why you enjoy the posts that I do, because I have such strong Scorpio energy in my chart. But the idea that all of this is happening in the third house, and this third house stellium of 4 Scorpio planets, you were born to teach, you were born to write, you were born to share, but you were born to share the uncomfortable bits that nobody likes to talk about, especially in regards to finance, because Mars is ruling all of those Scorpio placements in your second house of finance. Mars is in Libra, also in its fall. You've got Venus and Mars both in the sign of their fall, which I think is really interesting. So just the idea that hardship is a natural theme of your life, from a personal perspective, and we just need to be aware that you can't play the victim, and a large majority of your life is teaching you how to not play that victim, and how to make sure that although the gutters is a great place to find value, hidden trinkets that people have dropped, to mine for ore in the bowels of the earth, just because you're underground doesn't mean you're lesser than the people who are above you. And that's kind of the message that a lot of heavy Scorpio placements talk about. But because Mars is in your second house of finance and detriment, money might be a little bit of an issue. So we might need to seek out some advice for money, especially because it's being ruled in mutual reception with Venus retrograde in the third. Money and speaking for money specifically might be difficult. Working with a tour manager, if you do have a book that you're working on, working with an accountant or somebody who can manage those funds for you instead of trying to do it all yourself, because Scorpio and Virgo are very self-sufficient signs. They love to do it their own way. You also have Saturn in Taurus retrograde opposing directly your Venus in Scorpio in the third. So you might actually have great potential to travel for all of the teaching and writing that you do. However, the fact that finances are in detriment, because of that, you need to have somebody else watching your books, putting price points in place for you, making sure that you don't overcharge or undercharge, setting your fee schedule, and managing all of the prosperity that you will eventually reap from the deep energetic work that all of this Scorpio stellium is doing in your third house of writing, communication, teaching, neighbors, siblings. Then we have the moon in Aquarius in the 6th house, which is about 7 degrees away from the North Node in Aquarius. Not necessarily a conjunction, but close enough. The moon in Aquarius in the 6th. The moon in Aquarius in the 6th is also making a loose trine to the MC in Gemini in the 10th. So that entrepreneurial spirit definitely present. Aquarius tends to isolate. Gemini tends to be a little bit flighty. We create that trine in your work and your career space by understanding, again, the communication aspect. But know that you can work from home or you could work in the public. It really doesn't matter. You can do both. You can choose both. So back to a couple different charts ago, we talked about the idea of being public and having a public face, but also being private and having a private face. And I think that your moon specifically would prefer that you be private, but also allows that privacy to function very well in the public eye, because you're able to balance those inner and outer worlds. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Part of, again, the trial with all of this third house stuff is you've got the sun in Scorpio, but it's ruling the south node in Leo in the 12th. So you've got this tendency to suck the fun out of stuff if you really let your ego have its way with certain opportunities. Don't allow that to happen. And I think that's part of the reason why it's important for you to have somebody else who's managing a lot of the creative work that you're doing, the teaching and writing work that you're doing, because they'll be able to talk you out of those moments where you're a little bit too down and out, you can't see clearly, you feel like what you're doing isn't good enough, all of those detrimental Leo characteristics where we find the south node kind of sucking all of that light from the sun. And Scorpio tends to be rather dark by nature, so it's not necessarily something that is a one-off. It's repeated multiple times in your chart. So we need to surround you with people who are able to pull you up from that funk, but also to manage the creativity that you're able to access in that funk. A lot of your early Scorpio life lessons are part of what makes you a great teacher, writer, and communicator. I think that if you focus on sharing those tough topics in a way that only you can and exploring those depths and allowing that to become more in the public eye, you'll be able to create space for a lot of beautiful emotional blossoming to take place, instead of thinking that everything that has happened to you is a detriment and playing the victim. We really need to step forward and say, I was a victim, I am no longer one, and therefore I am able to lead others from that place of victim mentality into strength and resourcefulness. So that's that. That is Fran's chart. Thank you so much, Fran, for submitting your chart. We'll check in with the chat just to see if anybody has stuff. Thank you, Jojo. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who's sending in their birth information. I appreciate you. Make sure to, if you're interested in private consults, I do those as well. Somebody asked about tipping yesterday. If you want, you can send me a tip to sam@scorpiorisingastrology.com or buy an online class. I have tons of astrology stuff via the online school. Just look at the forecast and you'll be able to see the stuff with that. So we've got one more chart. We've got Bridget's chart. Bridget was born 10:11 a.m. in Philadelphia, in Philly. She's a Philly girl. Okay, let's look at the chart. So we've got Venus again in the first house. This time she's in Aquarius, ascendant in Aquarius, ruled by Saturn and Sag in the 11th, along with MC in the 11th. One of the highest goals of any chart is where the MC is located. And so when we see the MC in the 11th, the idea that part of Bridget's life mission is to find her tribe, and to make sure that she feels connected with those who are of like minds, I think is a very important part of her chart. That MC in Sagittarius is being ruled by Jupiter and Aries in the 3rd. So again, we've got a propensity for teaching and writing to large groups. Saturn and Uranus are there in Sagittarius in the 11th. So those groups are a little bit of a hard sell. People who are a little bit flighty, a little bit unpredictable, but also tough crowd, critics, people who have who are in the legal field or who have accumulated large amounts of a specific topic over time because Saturn is involved. She's got Mars and Scorpio in the 10th, along with Pluto and Scorpio in the 10th. That's fun. It's ruling that 3rd house again. So 3rd house, 10th house connections, speakers, writers, people who are able to teach, especially teach large groups because Jupiter is ruling the 11th house of friends and social groups. Pluto in the 11th or the 10th. Then we've got, Mars and Scorpio, then Aries. That's fine. We've got Sun in Capricorn in the 12th at 7 degrees, can join Neptune and Capricorn at 7 degrees. So Capricorn getting that Sun Neptune cazimi with Mercury in Capricorn as well at 11 degrees of Capricorn in the 12th house of hidden enemies. That's rough. So when we look at this chart specifically with Bridget, the Sun being in the 12th house, The 12th house is the house of hidden enemies. It's the house of hospitalizations. When I see the sun in the 12th house, it's the idea that self-harm is a possibility, or that you are your own worst enemy, especially because Neptune is conjoining the sun. The idea of substance abuse is something that needs to be taken care of. When I say substance abuse, I don't necessarily mean alcoholism. That could be drugs of all kinds. That could include over-the-counter drugs. The idea of aspirin, Advil, taking too much caffeine, yeah, or being addicted to energy drinks, aspartame and diet sodas. But the idea that there is some sort of chemical addiction that plagues your ego that we need to watch on a regular basis. That's part of that Neptune Cazimi. We just need to be aware of that. Also, from a medical perspective, narcolepsy, sleep being a major issue, and hormone balance because of that. Neptune being associated with sleep, conjoining the sun, somebody's energetic force in Capricorn, which is a naturally repressive sign. We find that could be the case as well. Aquarius, Saturn, Pisces ruling the second house, being ruled by Jupiter in the third. So again, like writing and money and being an author, teaching, last two charts, definitely part of your life experience, and learning how to work with money because of that. Bridget's actually got some really strong financial juice in her chart, because Jupiter is ruling the second house, and Jupiter is not afflicted in Pisces, or in Aries rather. Technically, the sign of it's square, so it's not great, but it's all right. Jupiter in Aries is that kind of brash king, which lends good financial reasoning, although slightly aggressive with financial stuff. Moon in Taurus in the fourth. Is there not a more lovely placement than that? I really think that Moon in Taurus in the fourth is somebody who's naturally just a homebody, somebody who really appreciates a home cooked meal, being surrounded by the comforts of their space that they've created themselves, wrapping up in all the blankets, surrounded by all the pillows, cup of hot cocoa, watching a Netflix special and falling asleep to it. Like, that's what Bridget's heart naturally craves, with that Moon in Taurus in the fourth, being super emotionally private. But again, sharing a lot of that privacy as the Mars in Scorpio and Pluto in Scorpio in the 10th, being public about what is private, speaks to me about what that placement is, especially because Venus in the first house is ruling the 9th house of travel, foreigners, and education, higher education specifically. The idea that travel is one of the ways that Bridget can recharge. I think that would be an excellent way to both find a home, but find a home away from home. So again, get that idea of a couple Airbnbs that you know, like, and trust, and retreat there on a regular basis, to do some of that writing, to do some of that reflective work, to really maybe even hosting a retreat based on the writing that you've done, and getting some of that stuff to come forward. Yeah, especially because the fourth house moon is ruling the 6th house of work, pets, and health. I think hospitality is just naturally one of your gifts. You know how to take care of people. You know how to be taken care of. It's something that you do very well. You have a lot of compassion. But again, your life mission is to really make sure that you master the creative arts, work with your tribe, and understand how to overcome some of that crippling self-doubt and some of those chemicals that might be getting in the way of your proper neurological functioning. Okay. That's it. Those are the 8 charts that I have. Thank you so much to everybody who's been joining on. Hello from Paris. I have like so many charts, you guys. I can't even tell you how many charts I have, and I'm getting more and more as I get my phone buzzing and the messenger notification coming up on this live video. So I think that I'll do it tomorrow. If you'd like me to do it again tomorrow, yeah, I'll totally do it around the same time, 10:30, because this is just my natural flow after I do my daily post and stuff. Thank you, Pat, for those kind words. If you would like to look at yesterday's video, you can find yesterday's video on my YouTube channel. Just search on YouTube for Scorpio Rising Astrology. And Then also, if you'd like to visit my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com, I am available for private chart consults. So if you would like to book a private chart consult, you totally can. That way we can go a little bit more one-on-one with everything. If you would like to be in the queue, again, the queue is very long, but if you would like to submit your birth information, I need your birth date, place, and exact birth time. If you do not have an exact birth time, I cannot do a consult for you. I need that time, as well as I need you to tell me the month and day. Don't just give me numbers. Give me the written out month and day, so that people internationally who use day first versus month first, I don't get those confused. And yeah, if you want to learn more about astrology, go to the website. You'll see the online school, or click the link in my daily posts that I do on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is Scorpio Rising Astrology. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. Thank you, everybody, for joining in for day 2. I'll also download this video and put it on YouTube as well. But we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.